When you travel to Korea, beware of overly friendly strangers randomly stopping you in the street and chatting you up. These are not your friends. They are recruiting you to join a cult. How upfront they are about this being a religious thing varies a lot, so you might not immediately pick up on their motive. Here's how it works. First, they will rope you into conversation and then either suggest sitting down in a cafe together, or ask you to join a Bible course, or invite you to come to their temple. Do not go with them. I promise you are not having a special cultural exchange moment with your new Korean bestie. This is not what is happening. Although, being approached on the street to join a cult is a very Korean experience, so I guess in a way it is culturally authentic. It is also important to point out that we shouldn't call them cults, because this is a pejorative term that describes religions of which society disapproves. This distinction divides groups into good and true religions that deserve to be protected and bad cults that can be denied the label religion. Cult is not a word social scientists use. Serious academic literature refers to them as NRMs, new religious movements, which does group all modern religions back together without differentiating them. But when we use the word cult colloquially, we're referring to something more specific, a dangerous high-control group. You might prefer the term criminal religious movements instead, though it is important to note that NRMs are not inherently more violent than groups within mainline religions. But I'm still going to use the word cult in this video, because I would argue that the thing that is being depicted in K-dramas are not NRMs. There's a tension between real-life religions and fictional dramatized cults, which represent the way society imagines the supposedly dangerous religious groups. Cults in K-dramas are a simulacrum, new religions as they exist in the collective Korean pop cultural imagination. And this is exactly what this video is about. How do Korean movies and TV shows represent and misrepresent fringe religious groups? We're going to analyze the K-drama cult aesthetic, talk about common tropes and character archetypes typical for this genre, and think about what these shows reveal about our fears. And if you enjoy this kind of content, consider joining my Patreon to support this channel. Korean NRMs are usually classified by scholars into Christian-based, Buddhist-based, Korean indigenous new religions, and new spirituality movements. The type of religion dictates what kind of aesthetic their worship halls have. I feel like most K-dramas make their fictional NRMs Christianity-based. There's a lot of variation here. Some of them are mega churches with epic laser shows, while others are humble rooms with just a cross and red velvet curtains for a small congregation. But there are examples of other types of fictional NRMs. The religion from the movie Swaha the Sixth Finger is Buddhism-based and is visually indistinguishable from every other Buddhist temple, which is why the protagonist spends the whole movie trying to figure out whether it is a fringe religion at all. The cult from Hometown is Hinduism-based, I think. I'm not 100% sure. This show is very vague about what it is they actually believe. We will circle back to why I think this is not a well-written cult, but at least the aesthetic is super cool. We get to see various rituals throughout the show, and they are very cinematic. Divine Light Church, the alien cult in Glitch, is very Heaven's Gate coded. Their symbol is a crop circle, and their holy text was written by a woman in a psych ward in the 70s. They work a lot with colorful light shows and VR headsets, which look really nice when everyone wears them together. Visually, my favorite fictional K-drama cult is The New Truth from the Netflix show Hellbound. This religion is not based on any real-life groups, it is completely fictional and original. This world is incredibly fleshed out and detailed, even though Hellbound only has 6 relatively short episodes per season. The iconography is unique and well thought out, mainly because this show is based on a webtoon that already did all the world building, and it translated really well into the live-action adaptation. The one thing that I find a bit annoying about fictional Korean religions is how much they lean into the evil aesthetic. I understand that this is just cinematic language, and the unsettling atmosphere is for the viewer's benefit, but I'm bothered by the fact that K-dramas make a visual distinction between normal mainstream religions with regular interior design and dimly lit sinister cults with lots of candles and a spooky atmosphere. Movies and TV shows use a lot of Satanic Panic era visual cues, which look great on screen, But do real religions do that? As if you can discern whether a group is problematic or not based on whether they look evil. For a religious leader, there are several different styles that mean different things. The cult leaders, and there are usually 2 or 3 people at the top of the hierarchy, have different motives. Some are true believers, while others are just in it for the money, and you can always tell which one is which by their outfits. Although it is more of a spectrum than a clear divide. First we have the egocentric overdressed cult leader archetype. The villain from season 1 of Save Me falls in this category. He always stands out with his all-white suit and a bleached hair and eyebrows combo, which makes him look almost ethereal. Pulling off this type of look without looking tacky is harder than it looks, by the way, and not all fictional cult leaders make it look stylish. They want to look elegant, but fundamentally, this is a character who doesn't know when to stop. So instead of looking chic and elevated, they often end up looking ridiculous. The cult in High Five also has an over-the-top aesthetic. Their leaders wear opulent and flashy outfits, which are reminiscent of the Moonies and JMS, both infamous real NRMs from Korea. So this character design choice is quite realistic. This cult leader archetype is a believer, but they believe in themselves as an extension of God, and they are not humble. Then we have the polar opposite aesthetic that is reserved for the true believer. This is a cult leader who dresses like a high school history teacher, casual and respectable. Yuain's character in Hellbound is a great example, dressed in jeans and a blazer. Umtegu in Hometown is also a plaid shirt kinda guy, and they're both more of a prophet and founder figure. This type of character believes in something bigger than themselves and is not trying to be God. But don't get fooled by their casual style. This cult leader is deeply invested in their belief and will absolutely murder their enemies and their own followers without blinking. The third type is the corporate cult leader. This is not a believer at all. They're just in it for the money and the power. Managing a religion is a business venture for them, and they're dressed accordingly. This cult leader archetype wears classy tailored suits and is very pragmatic and cynical. They're also not interested in preaching themselves most of the time and would rather spend their energy using criminal gang tactics to get rid of the hero who's trying to destroy the cult. This character is focused on making followers donate all their money and property to the church. Religious groups in Korea are not subsidized by the state, by the way. Usually they're registered as non-profits or foundations. We also have to differentiate between the cult leader's personal style and ceremonial garb of their religion. A lot of these shows have pretty cool robes for the clergy. I really appreciate it when K-dramas spend effort on designing the little details. Symbols make fictional NRMs feel more lived in. In the really well thought out K-dramas with a higher budget, there's also additional uniform for the enforcers, like the suits in Hometown with the logo on it. This is always a simple look that clearly differentiates them from the regular followers. I am obsessed with the uniform of the higher-ups in Hellbound. They wear these utility jackets with a patch like delivery drivers do. This is so specific and Korean, I love it. The followers themselves wear regular civilian clothing, unless they live on the cult compound, in which case they all wear the same outfits. Usually a simple white linen suit, but light blue is also acceptable. This is a comfy outfit for rituals and intense prayer sessions. How good the followers look also tells us about the values of a group. Are they wearing all white pristine clothing that signals purity and cleanliness? Or are they dirty and tattered because the followers are neglected and abused? There is one more aspect to the K-drama cult aesthetic that has nothing to do with fashion, but still visually depicts religious devotion. I'm talking about charismatic praying. In fictional cults, everyone prays very intensely by dramatically falling on their knees, swaying, shouting, and speaking in tongues, which is quite typical for Korean Protestant churches. For K-drama cults, casual followers are not enough. They need capital B believers who are convinced their leader can do literal miracles. There are several ways to orchestrate that. Let's start with the classic, the faith healing scam. In season 1 of Save Me, we're introduced to the main villain as he performs psychic surgery on a man with cancer. He pops a vial of fake blood and pretends like he took something out of the stomach without any incisions, a medical fraud trick that impresses his followers. Of course, nobody is going to follow up with doctors to check whether the tumor is still there and growing. The crowd is already convinced. Plus, you can always blame the people for not believing hard enough if the healing is not working. it is important to note that you can't do this scam and not be aware of doing it. The healer knows this is a trick and is doing this on purpose, assuming nobody will notice. Making a wheelchair user stand up and take a step is another popular one. The easiest way is to hire an actor who is in on it, which is what the cult leader in the second season of Save Me does. He is quite a sneaky villain, because in this moment, he's not just tricking the followers, he's also manipulating the pastor, who is supposed to believe that he has magical healing powers. The pastor is 100% sincere in his belief, and he's not aware of the scam. But in a different dynamic, the scam can also work without a shill. You can go ahead and skip the middleman and just force a wheelchair user to stand up. This trick relies on the idea that everyone who's in a wheelchair is paralyzed from the waist down, which is simply not true. Most people who have a wheelchair are actually ambulatory wheelchair users, meaning they technically can stand up and maybe even walk a little, just not very far, and it might be painful and exhausting. Ask anyone in a wheelchair if a stranger ever freaked out and accused them of faking it after seeing them move their leg. Forcing a wheelchair user to stand up is really not that impressive of a trick if you think about it. All these sleight of hand tricks made me wonder, what if the supernatural was real? I guess religious people would argue that we already live in a world like this, but that's not what I'm talking about. I mean literal magic, something you can see whether you believe in it or not. What if the metaphysical was real in the universe of a K-drama? How would it change the cult dynamic? There are several K-dramas with this premise that all have a different approach to this question. First, we have the type of show in which a supernatural phenomena starts happening for real, and the story explores how humans react to it. Hellbound is a prime example. People start getting these prophecies about their deaths, and then monsters appear to kill the recipient. The focus of this show is not on the monsters and how to defeat them. It is about how religion is used to explain a crisis that everyone is witnessing. The new truth itself doesn't have an exclusive claim to be magic, it is not something their religion does. Although they do murder people and fake divine interventions sometimes, just to help speed up the process of gaining power. Dark Hole is another show about a supernatural apocalypse, but in this one, a pre-existing group reacts to the end of days. In this type of story, the magical is almost irrelevant. These shows are about society, and the real monsters are the humans. People turning to religion in times of crisis is a real pattern in Korean history. This is when a lot of NRMs appear. The Japanese colonization, the Korean War, the IMF crisis. A lot of new religions are founded and get popular in times of uncertainty. There is also a second type of supernatural plot. In these K-dramas, the cult does have exclusive access to real magic. The 2025 movie High Five has an interesting twist. A cult leader on his deathbed, who already had a successful career as a fake faith healer, acquires real healing powers for plot reasons. I think this is such a cool premise, but unfortunately, High Five is not interested in exploring the religious implications, because this is a superhero movie that spends most of its runtime on cool action scenes. It is a good watch, and I would recommend it, but all of the fighting takes place under the stage. The followers don't even know what happened, and we don't get to see how it changes their faith. Another example of a story in which a cult leader has supernatural powers is Swaha. The protagonist investigates a suspicious Buddhist temple and analyzes their scripture, only to find out that their esoteric beliefs are real and superpowers can be attained by enlightenment. I guess this means this is not a cult, but the one real religion then? How does this change the protagonist's faith? He is a pastor. These are all fascinating philosophical questions that the viewer needs to think about on their own time, afterwards, because the movie itself is just asking and not answering any of them. Fair enough, that's what movies are for, to make us think. In Hometown, it is the other way around. Umtegu's character attains magical superpowers as a child and then starts a religion as an adult. He can control birds with his mind and make people forget things with a fire. There are also videotapes and cassettes with mysterious sounds on them that hypnotize anyone who watches them in the right order, after which a scary wet ghost appears and make people murder their favorite person. And honestly, this show is doing too much. The amount of plot twists really muddies the story. Hometown insists on a slow, puzzle-style reveal in which nothing is clear and everything is a mystery that is not quite explained. It is a really good-looking K-drama with an amazing soundtrack and an absolutely stacked cast. But it is such a frustrating watch. I'm a hater. Because the cult founder is a literal wizard, the show is completely useless as a study of cult dynamics. Hometown perpetuates the idea that brainwashing is real, a mysterious technique that can magically make people do things they never would have done otherwise. That it is possible to hypnotize people into doing things they are not aware of happening. One of the big reviews in this show is that the female lead and all her friends helped carry out a terrorist attack when they were in high school, but their memories got erased. This show has characters who were completely unaware that they and everyone around them was in a cult. And not in a, oh, I didn't realize my religion was toxic way. There's literally mass amnesia and recruitment through hypnosis. The idea that new religious movements use brainwashing has been debunked decades ago, but it is still used in popular media. Brainwashing as a concept is part of the American Cold War era propaganda against communism, and it was later used as an explanation for young people joining religious groups. They must have been manipulated through mysterious mind control techniques. The argument is that some religions are so horrible, no sane person in full possession of their mental faculties would ever voluntarily join. The distinction between legitimate religions, which don't use brainwashing, and cults, which supposedly do, is not part of accepted social science. Brainwashing theories are pseudoscience that can be used to label unpopular religious groups as problematic. This is a circular argument. Certain groups are cults because they use brainwashing, and we know they use brainwashing because they are labeled as cults. I wish movies and TV shows would stop promoting these ideas. Fictional cult stories are meant to be a cautionary tale for the viewers, but nobody is learning how to spot a dangerous religion by watching Hometown. If anything, it does the opposite. Superpowers and magic tricks are not the only way to manufacture an out-of-body religious experience for the followers. A good light show is also an option, like the one the leaders in Glitch stage. But it is not enough on its own. The key to pulling off this stunt lies in drugging the congregation with a mysterious gas. Almost all fictional cults in the Korean pop cultural imagination use drugs as a manipulation tactic, because it sounds like a scary illegal thing an evil religion would do. This trope is extremely overused. K-dramas make it look like joining a religion is an easy and reliable way to get access to free drugs. In a 2-episode arc of Zombie Detective, the main characters investigate a weight loss center that is secretly a cult. They keep their followers on a strict diet, which includes weight loss supplements, which are actually hallucinogenic drugs that they make in their own lab in the basement. In Brainworks, laced communion bread is distributed before a faith healing ritual. In the cult subplot in Unmasked, there's a whole poppy field in the cult compound that is used to manufacture drugs that make followers into literal zombies. In Hometown, there is LSD-laced candy, which makes no sense in the context of this show. They have magical brainwashing powers. Why do they need the drugs? In the movie Intruder, the family is drugged to make them compliant, while the cult slowly takes over the protagonist's house without him noticing it. In Season 1 of Save Me, the church is keeping the female lead's mom heavily medicated to keep her confused and delirious, so she doesn't try to escape. In Dark Hole, the religious group keeps trying to drug the female lead with suspicious-looking drinks that of course knock her out as soon as she accepts one. Then we have Narco Saints, a Netflix show in which the cult leader is a literal cartel boss who uses drugs to manipulate his followers. To escape law enforcement, he moves his whole church to Suriname, where his congregation is even more isolated. He utilizes drugs in every aspect of his religious group. Followers are involved in manufacturing and smuggling the product, and they also have to use the drugs themselves too, even the little kids. Unfortunately, the show doesn't really explore the cult subplot. Narco Saints is mainly about the cartel. Save Me Season 2 has several drug-related storylines. The antagonist has been looking creepily at young women and girls this whole time, so it is not a surprise that he eventually attempts to traffic the male lead's sister. Under the guise of getting her a job, the cult leader moves her to an apartment in Seoul, where she spends several days continuously being roofied with GHB and brought to a club to entertain men. There is also a meth subplot. One of the villagers has inoperable cancer, and the cult leader gives her special healing water that magically makes her super energetic. This is so insidious, he's scamming desperate people by secretly drugging them and then takes all of their money. Because meth doesn't cure cancer, the woman dies, which leaves her husband absolutely devastated. Except now, he's completely broke and also addicted to meth without even realizing it. Sometimes, in an unexpected plot twist, the healing water in a K-drama cult is not spiked, but instead it is just regular water that doesn't do anything. The scam is that you're overpaying for it. The beliefs of the cult in the movie exist within are based on the magical properties of water, and we can see the antagonist use it in an attempt to heal his sick daughter. In Save Me Season 1, the church members use so-called living water, which everyone casually sprinkles over food. The plot twist is that this is the water the cult leader washed his feet with. Save the Children is a very common theme in K-dramas and movies about NRMs. Cult horror explores the societal fear of a young generation being under attack from the religious other. There is always a child that needs to be saved from a cult, and usually it is their parents who brought them there in the first place. In Narco Saints, there's a little girl the same age as the protagonist's daughter back home who asks him for help because her mom is just praying all day long while the group mistreats the kid. The mom deep in the cult who's hurting her child by being part of an abusive religion is a stock character that you can see in a lot of these shows, along with its counterpart, the non-religious dad who tries to save the kid. In Intruder, the main character's wife joins a religion without him noticing, because he's a workaholic who's not paying attention to her needs. The group infiltrates his home so they can kidnap his daughter, who is said to become the new leader, which is what the dad needs to prevent. In Glitch, the girl with the shotgun grew up in the church without being able to see her dad, who later infiltrates the group and teams up with the protagonists to get her out of there. In Brainworks, the skeptical dad who was trying to save his family ends up getting murdered by the cult leader. The villain pins the crime on his nonverbal daughter because what are they gonna do, arrest a 6-year-old? The fear of cults using children to get away with committing violent crime is also a common theme. In Hellbound, the protagonist's teenage daughter joins the New Truth, where she is manipulated into murdering a man. The Arrowhead, the more extremist sect of this religion, constantly uses minors to commit crimes on their behalf, while the cops can't do anything about it. In Hometown, teenagers are literally brainwashed into committing a terrorist attack with the help of sarin gas, which is clearly a reference to Aum Shinrikyo. In Season 2 of Save Me, the pastor uses the boy with a developmental disability as his accomplice, offering him food and care, only to then involve him in several murders. Saving a child from getting poisoned during a mass suicide is another frequent trope. In Dark Hole, the random little girl the female lead is taking care of accidentally ends up in a doomsday cult, which is planning to poison themselves as a group, now that the world is ending. They want the girl to join too, but our protagonist manages to save her just in time. In Hometown, the female lead is also trying to talk the followers, some of whom are minors, out of drinking the poison. Preventing a mass suicide is often the final horrifying task for the protagonist, but just like with the drugs, K-dramas dramatically inflate the likelihood of this happening. Out of the thousands of religions that exist in the world, there's only a handful of documented cases. Mass suicide is very shocking and tragic, but the idea that every controversial NRM is preparing the next Jonestown is just fear-mongering. But children are not the only demographic that needs saving. Almost every show in this genre has a variation of the kidnapped by a cult trope. When male characters are kidnapped, they usually get locked up in a dirty, damp basement where they get tortured. When women get kidnapped, it is often combined with a different trope that I call accidentally becoming a messiah. This is when, through a silly coincidence, the protagonist somehow becomes the chosen one of the religion they are fighting against. In Brainworks, the male lead spontaneously comes up with a plan to dress up as the savior, which is a bold move that lets him just walk in and carry out the little girl while everyone watches in shock. In Zombie Detective, the male lead, who is a literal zombie, participates in a faith healing session, which convinces the followers that he is holy. In all three examples, this is a short and funny scene that is not relevant to the plot. This trope is very gendered, because when it happens to a female character, the story is very different. Together, the kidnapped by a cult trope and accidental messiah trope become the damselled messiah girl trope. There are plenty of examples. The female lead in Save Me 1 is stuck in this cult because of her parents, and even though she is legally an adult, she can't just leave them there. She spends the whole show desperately trying to escape, begging people for help. The cult leader has also been grooming her since she was a teenager to become the spirit mother of their religion, which of course requires her marrying him. In Glitch, the protagonist breaks into the home of the prophet of the alien cult she is investigating and accidentally becomes the messiah after the woman draws a portrait of her. The followers are super excited and happily kidnap her and force her to participate in their alien visitation ceremony while she's wearing a holographic bridal dress. Hometown also has a version of that subplot. First, the group kidnaps the 15-year-old girl, who's supposedly the founder's daughter, so she can become the next leader. The female lead, her aunt, then convinces them to let the teenager go and switches places with her to become a spiritual teacher herself. As I already mentioned, the little girl from Intruder is also being groomed as the successor. These fictional religions are really into the idea of a holy maiden figure. In Crime Puzzle, the female lead has also been groomed as a child and chosen to eventually marry the old creepy cult leader before she even knew the group existed. Then we have Luca the Beginning, a show about a cult that is trying to create a race of superhumans for experiments. The male lead has a mix of human and electric eel DNA, which gives him superpowers. So when the female lead accidentally becomes pregnant and gives birth to an electrical baby, the cult kidnaps them because the baby is the special one. But the damselled messiah archetype is not just a helpless damsel in distress. This is a character that actively attempts to use her wits to escape. She does fight for her freedom and has a lot of agency. Even after other characters help her escape captivity, she ultimately decides to go back and use the power she has as the messiah to help all the other followers who are still trapped in the group. Saving herself is not enough. She needs to bring down the cult once and for all, which ironically makes her a real savior figure. The damselled messiah girl cannot defeat a powerful group on her own. She needs help from the hero archetype. This is a character who, as an outsider, has a clear-eyed perspective of the cult abuse. This is often an underdog who is not being taken seriously when they try to expose the group. In Glitch, it is a homeless YouTuber who investigates the paranormal, and in both seasons of Save Me, it is a guy with a heart of gold and impeccable cheekbones who just came out of prison. This character usually doesn't have any structural power, but they make up for it with their bravery. The hero can also be a journalist, like the main characters in Unmasked, or a pastor, like in Swaha and Fiery Priest. The hero archetype needs to figure out who their allies are, because there's often already a mole inside the cult who is also trying to expose their crimes. They just need to find each other without raising any suspicions. This character also needs to assemble a lovable, goofy gang, because defeating an evil cult leader is a team effort that requires a lot of coordination. The investigation is a staple trope that every self-respecting cult K-drama has to include. The protagonists secretly infiltrate the cult, where they get to see what the group is doing when they think nobody is watching, and the audience gets to sit on the edge of the seat, hoping the hero doesn't get caught. Sneaking into the building is often followed by another classic trope, running away from a mob of angry followers who chase the main character once they get caught. There is also a relatively new micro-trope in which the protagonists outsmart the villains by using a drone to spy on the cult compound. A lot of these shows also have the disgruntled believer archetype. This is a character who is deeply devoted to the group in the beginning, but gets disillusioned once they figure out that the cult leader is a scammer. To my surprise, this is not an ally who's going to help the hero with their insider knowledge. Instead, they're more of a wild card who adds to the chaos. In Save Me 1, Disciple Kang, one of the higher-ups, starts off as a true believer, but ends up dousing the church with gasoline right before the final showdown. The antagonist in Exist Within is also very devoted, but once he finds out that the magical water they use is a scam, he kidnaps and kills several church members and keeps the bodies in an apartment. In Save Me 2, the pastor also struggles to accept that he has been used for a scam and snaps. He goes on a killing spree and sets the church on fire, something the villain did not see coming, even though he was actively encouraging the pastor's religious psychosis this whole time. I would categorize him as the unhinged pastor archetype, together with the protagonist from the 2025 movie Revelations, which has nothing to do with cults, I just really wanted to recommend it. Police officers are another essential stock character archetype of this genre. What is notable about cult K-dramas is that most of them are not propaganda, because police are depicted as completely useless in these shows. Unless they are the main characters, of course. Cops never believe the protagonist, even when presented with evidence. Instead of taking the female lead in Save Me seriously, when she desperately begs them for help, the cops call her kidnappers and hand her right back to them, dismissing it as a private family matter. They even apologize to the cult leader for the inconvenience. You see, he is always one step ahead and already bribed them and earned their trust as a respected community leader. Next to the classic corrupt police officer trope, there's also another cop archetype who is secretly a cult member who has been purposely stalling the investigation to protect the group. Police not taking cult abuse reports seriously is a common theme across K-dramas. They flat out refuse to investigate until the last moment, after the hero already did all the work for them and presents evidence that can no longer be ignored. All Korean movies and dramas about cults kinda have the same ending, or to be more specific, one of three possible endings. Option 1: arrest. Once the protagonists find solid proof of the cult leader's crimes, the villain finally gets arrested by the police. The antagonist is very explicitly arrested for unambiguous crimes like murder, and not for their religious beliefs. A lot of these shows also include a scene in which several dead bodies are found buried on the church premises. If the criminal justice system taking care of a cult leader doesn't feel satisfying enough for you, you might prefer option 2, fire. This type of ending is super common in K-dramas about cults. One of the characters sets the church, or the cult leader, or both on fire. This is a powerful and cathartic ending that feels very fitting for the religious horror genre. The antagonist is literally burning alive right before they go to hell. Very symbolic and evocative imagery. It is such a prevalent ending for a cult K-drama that it feels like a subversion of the trope when nothing is burning in the last act. There's also a third option. The cult leader dies, but not in a fire. Getting shot or falling over a cliff are also good options for an abusive cult leader. Another scene that almost all of these K-dramas and movies include is when the cult gets exposed for its crimes on the news. This is how the audience and the protagonists can be confident that there was an investigation and it really is all over now. There is often an additional little plot twist at the end, in which side characters go on to start their own cults. Yes, the main villain might be dead or in prison, but there will always be more cults, and we all need to stay vigilant. It is a bit disappointing, but there are only a few K-dramas that are interested in what happens after leaving a high control group. The last episode of Save Me Too shows how the followers react once they find out that the church is gone and they've all been scammed. There is also a time skip at the end, and we get to see how they're still traumatized and struggling 3 years later. Brainworks also tackles the topic of leaving a cult, but with a different and more controversial approach, through cult deprogramming. The protagonists help the devoted mom and her daughter escape from the cult and lock them up in the male lead's home for a few days, supposedly for their own good. This gives the mom space to reflect on her time with the group. In the show, this is framed as a harsh but sobering wake-up call. The logical and science-oriented male lead helps her find the courage to stand up to the leader and finally leave the cult. This ending should be empowering, except if you think about this subplot for more than 2 seconds, you will realize that these cops literally kidnap and lock up civilians in their private home with the goal of forcing them to denounce their religion. Also, why does the male lead already have an extra room in his house that locks from the outside and has cameras installed everywhere? Who does he normally kidnap and confine there? I know this sounds bad, but in real life, the practice of kidnapping cult followers to deconvert them is way worse than what Brainworks is depicting. Deprogramming was developed in the 70s in the US as a mirror image of brainwashing. If people can be sucked into a cult, then maybe the same tactics can be used to reverse it. This technique requires kidnapping believers and imprisoning them in a secluded facility, where they get bombarded with negative information about their cult until they surrender. As we already discussed, brainwashing theories have been debunked, and by the end of the 20th century, deprogramming became illegal in most Western countries. The only democratic country where deprogramming is still practiced is Korea. Coercive religious conversion in South Korea is exclusively carried out by fundamentalist Protestant churches associated with the CCCK, the Christian Cult Counseling Association of Korea. Their victims are mainly members of Shincheonji. According to statistics provided by the controversial group themselves, young women in their 20s account for 77% of victims of deprogramming. These deconversion attempts are very violent and have resulted in at least 2 deaths, 13 admittances to psychiatric institutions, and 43 divorces. Kidnapping people is actually illegal, so the pastors who are the masterminds behind this practice never participate directly, and instead instruct the victims' families to do the dirty work. And yet, Brainworks has the audacity to make deprogramming look sensible and rational. Even though all K-drama cults draw from the same pool of tropes, some of these fictional religious groups feel like a cheap parody, while others tell complex and deeply human stories. My least favorite fictional K-drama cult is the group from Unmasked. This show has the Case of the Week format, so the cult subplot is introduced and resolved within 1 episode. And it is unfortunately the first episode, so half of the runtime is spent on introducing the main characters, and the little time that is left for the investigation is mainly used to showcase personalities of these protagonists. We don't meet any of the believers. In this show, the followers are quite literally zombies with no free will, a fanatical, mindless hive, and not individuals with unique stories. Out of over 20 shows and movies that I watched for this video, my favorite K-drama is, by far, Save Me Season 2. I really feel like they shot themselves in the foot and confused the audience by calling it Save Me 2, which makes it sound like a sequel, but the 2 seasons are not related to each other, they're 2 separate shows. Save Me 2 doesn't reduce believers to a brainwashed crowd. People don't join religions because they're stupid. They do it because the group offers them something they need. This show really takes its time to explore the members and their individual motivations for joining. When viewers say that K-dramas with 16 episodes are superior because they have more time for meaningful character development, we're talking about shows like this. I also think Save Me 2 has one of the best written smart villains in K-dramas I have ever seen. In my video essay about the teenage mastermind girl archetype, I talked about how annoying it is when genius characters can somehow predict actions of everyone around them with uncanny accuracy, and everything is always part of the plan. But this cult leader is not written like this. He constantly runs into obstacles and has to spontaneously adapt and improvise. We can see him adjust his plans in real time. He eavesdrops a lot and then uses this information to his advantage. He also makes people think everything is their idea. He never asks anyone to give him money directly. Instead, he orchestrates situations in which he can act all reluctant and coy. He also talks differently with different people. He understands exactly when to use religious language and when to appeal to people's financial anxieties. This show also explores the group dynamic itself and how the followers are kept in check by creating a divide between the insiders and the outsiders who are agents of Satan. This is the opposite of the brainwashing narrative, which K-dramas really need to stop perpetuating. This is important because our view of what religious cults are is shaped by the things we see in media, and at the same time, fictional media reflects our ideas about religion back to us. It is a constant self-perpetuating feedback loop. An Ouroboros eating its own tail.